Before we saw the moment Democratic House Leader Hakeem Jeff realized that you shouldn't pick a fight with your own party unless you're rock solid. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. What follows shows how political ambition can make even careful leaders miss their own weak spots. The closed-door Democratic caucus meeting was called because members were worried about party unity ahead of the crucial midterms. The Rayburn House office building conference room was full, representatives at the table, staff pressed against the walls, everyone aware that tensions had been rising for weeks between the party's establishment and its progressive wing. As leader, Jeff had cast himself as the bridge, the steady voice who could hold the party together while letting different views be heard. But behind closed doors, he'd been growing impatient. He saw some progressives using committee sessions to score headlines, and he believed that showmanship was harming the party's credibility and hurting its ability to govern. For almost an hour, the meeting had followed the usual routine, when Jeff suddenly decided to say what everyone had been feeling. He rose from the head of the table. His posture stayed controlled, but people who knew him could see the strain. When he spoke, his tone mixed authority with a tight frustration that made clear he planned to make a firm point. "Before we move on to our legislative agenda," he began, eyes sweeping the room and settling on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who sat quietly reading notes on her tablet, "I need to address something that's been bothering me and many of your colleagues. Too many members are turning committee hearings into personal stages. Those viral moments and cable appearances may get attention, but they are eroding our credibility and making it harder for us to deliver results." The room dropped into a hush. People shifted in their seats. Jeff's words had the feel of something more than a policy debate. He grew sharper, each sentence building his case. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, looking straight at her, "your recent hearings have raised real concerns. You've attacked members across the aisle and inside our party, turned oversight into theater, and created chaotic committee scenes. That's not leadership. That's self-promotion at the expense of unity. Name one concrete legislative win from that approach. Show me bills passed, policies changed, governance achieved. From where I sit, it looks like brand building, not lawmaking." Silence. This was a direct, unusual confrontation from the party leader to a nationally visible member. Some representatives looked stunned that Jeff would press a colleague so openly. Others felt relieved that someone had finally spoken up. The pressure in the room grew as everyone waited for Crockett's answer. She closed her tablet slowly and met Jeff's stare, her face suggesting she had expected a moment like this. When she replied, her voice stayed calm and controlled, but contained a firmness that made several members lean forward. "Leader Jeff," she said, "since you've questioned my methods and my results, it's fair to look at your record too. You talk about unity and getting things done, yet we should examine your ties, including $17 million in donations from corporate interests you say you oppose. Or we should ask why so many progressive bills die in committees you influence, even when they have support across our caucus." She reached into her briefcase, pulled out a folder, and set it on the table with deliberate force. The folder's slap in the quiet room sounded loud. "Because you asked for proof of outcomes for my approach," she said, "here's evidence that you've actively undermined progressive members, not to keep the caucus together, but to protect donor interests." She leaned forward. "If you want to challenge my effectiveness, let's talk about your effectiveness at hiding your corporate ties while calling yourself a progressive leader." Jeff's calm face flickered. His jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous," he said, but the edge in his voice had thinned. "You're deflecting with accusations." Crockett didn't blink. "Baseless?" she asked, flicking open the folder and pulling out the first page. "Let's go through these one by one and you can tell us which of these are baseless." The room bristled. This exchange was no longer rhetorical. It was a public showdown disguised as a private meeting. Some members exchanged worried looks, the kind that asked, silently, "How did it come to this?" Others watched with the thrill of long-suppressed disagreement finally made visible. For Crockett, the moment looked planned. For Jeff, it felt like a gamble that might expose divisions rather than heal them. Jeff tried to steady himself, returning to the posture of a leader who needed to reassert control.
"We are here to work," he said. "Pointing fingers won't help us pass laws." But Crockett kept her composure methodical and exact. She began reading aloud from the documents, dates, memos, committee roll calls, details that forced the room to listen with more than curiosity. Her tone was surgical, designed to shift the argument from broad accusations to narrow facts. As the folder's pages slid across the table, the narrative shifted from theater versus governance to an evidence-driven dispute. Members who had been quietly frustrated now had specific claims to weigh. Those who supported Jeff had to contend with documents that demanded answers. Those sympathetic to Crockett felt vindicated by the specificity. The meeting's atmosphere shifted from political theater to raw accountability, and everyone in that room realized the stakes. A party splintered right before the midterms could cost them more than headlines ever could. Jeff swallowed, then responded with careful language meant to diffuse the situation. He disputed several items, questioned others, and asked for time to verify documents he said he'd never seen. Crockett interrupted only occasionally, always measured, always returning the focus to the facts at hand. The back and forth exposed a deeper reality. The caucus was no longer a single bloc with one voice. It contained factions with different strategies and priorities, and both sides believed their approach was the correct path to progressive goals. That truth hung in the room as the meeting continued. The uneasy awareness that unity required compromise, but compromise might require some members to accept slower, less dramatic work. Jeff, who had long presented himself as the party stabilizer, now faced the risk that his attempt to discipline the caucus would backfire and expose him to the very criticism he'd hurled at Crockett, playing to protect a political image and interests, rather than pushing policy. Crockett, meanwhile, held firm to her argument that visible pressure and public hearings were necessary to force action and spotlight injustice. She argued that without dramatic public moments, some issues would never get the attention needed to pass real reforms. Her folder's contents weren't just accusations, they were a ledger of missed opportunities and internal obstacles, evidence she wanted the caucus to see and the leader to answer for. And if you want to see more insider moments like this, moments that show how party politics really happen when power, principle, and personal ambition collide, make sure you're subscribed. Because when the caucus meets behind closed doors, the consequences can shape what the public sees, what laws get passed, and who stands for what when it matters most. The deeper story behind this confrontation had been unfolding quietly for months, though almost no one outside Jasmine Crockett's closest advisors understood just how serious the situation had become. What started as a routine internal review by her team simply trying to understand why widely supported progressive proposals kept stalling in committee quickly revealed something much larger. As they dug deeper, they uncovered a repeated pattern of obstruction that pointed directly back to Leader Jeff's office. But it was the reason behind these delays that turned normal political strategy into something far more troubling. Hakeem Jeff had built his entire career on the image of a smart, practical leader who could balance progressive values with political reality. His rise through Democratic leadership had been fast and seemed almost guaranteed. He was known for raising huge amounts of money, keeping members in line, and projecting stability to the public. Many in Washington openly talked about him as a future Speaker of the House, maybe even a future presidential candidate. He had crafted a polished public brand, progressive enough to energize the base, but moderate enough to reassure donors and voters in key districts. But Crockett's investigation revealed a very different story. Evidence showed that Jeff had been quietly trading away progressive policies in exchange for corporate money, using his leadership position to block legislation that threatened his donors, all while claiming in public to support those same policies. The operation was so carefully designed that most committee chairs didn't even realize they were part of a coordinated effort. Jeff would attach his name to progressive bills, speak in favor of them on cable news, and even push members to vote for them, while playing procedural tactics behind closed doors to ensure those bills never moved anywhere. The financial trail made the situation even more alarming. Through a complex web of PACs, consulting firms, and paid appearances, Jeff had received more than $17 million from industries he claimed to challenge: pharmaceutical giants, major insurance corporations, Wall Street institutions, and powerful tech companies. The donations were arranged in ways that made them extremely difficult to track, routed through several layers to disguise their original sources. Yet Crockett's team had patiently followed every payment and documented every link. As the stunned Democratic caucus watched, Crockett pulled out the first set of documents and passed copies around. Her tone stayed steady and professional, but everyone could tell the material she was presenting had the potential to shake the party to its core. "These are internal communications from Leader Jeff's office to committee chairs," she said, pointing to dates spanning more than a year. In these messages, he directly instructs chairs to delay or quietly block specific bills. She held up one example. "Here's the Medicare for All hearing that was postponed 6 separate times, and here's the message from Jeff telling the chair to stall it until after the midterms, no matter what excuse they had to use." She opened another file. "This is the pharmaceutical pricing bill that mysteriously died in committee. Here is Jeff advising the chair to bury it because, and I'm quoting, 'Pharma has taken care of us, so we need to take care of them.'" Next came the financial documents showing donation surges that matched each legislative setback. Whenever a bill threatened drug company profits, pharma contributions to Jeff's political network spiked. Whenever reforms aimed at Wall Street were blocked, banking industry money poured in. The pattern was so tight, so repetitive, that even members loyal to Jeff found it impossible to ignore. Some representatives looked genuinely stunned. Progressive members, who had long suspected sabotage but never had proof, now understood why. Their most popular bills kept collapsing without explanation. Moderates, who had supported Jeff, shifted uncomfortably, realizing they might now be tied to what looked like a major political scandal. "This is a political attack," Jeff insisted, his voice cracking slightly. "You're twisting normal communications into something sinister. There's nothing unusual here." Crockett didn't raise her voice. Instead, she reached for another document, this one formatted like a transcript. "You want context?" she said. "Here is full context." She held up a small device and pressed a button. The room filled with a voice everyone recognized instantly: Hakeem Jeffries himself. "The progressives in my caucus think they're going to transform healthcare," Jeff said in the recording, followed by laughter from what sounded like an audience of executives. "They don't get that we control the process. I give them their hearings, let them talk, let them introduce their bills. It keeps them happy. But nothing that hurts your business model is ever getting to the House floor as long as I'm in charge. That's my guarantee to you, and that's why your support matters." Gasps spread across the room. The recording continued, with Jeff mocking individual progressive members and calling them useful tools, people he allowed to create excitement among grassroots voters while privately keeping them far from real power. The disdain in his voice was unmistakable. The room erupted. Progressive members shouted in outrage, realizing they had been manipulated and dismissed behind their backs. Even some moderates looked furious, shocked at the bluntness of Jeff's remarks and the disrespect shown towards his own caucus. Several members rose from their seats as if ready to walk out, while others demanded that Jeff respond immediately. But Crockett lifted her hand, signaling the room to quiet. "I'm not done," she said, pulling out yet another stack of documents. "What comes next isn't just unethical, it may be criminal." She tapped a button on the small screen she had brought with her. A set of financial charts appeared. "These are offshore accounts registered in the Cayman Islands under shell companies tied directly to Leader Jeff," she said. "Over the last 5 years, around $8 million has been funneled into these accounts.
We're still tracking the original sources, but the early findings show links to foreign corporations with business interests in U.S. legislation. She moved to another file. This one contains screenshots of encrypted messages. These communications, she said, are between Jeff and representatives connected to Saudi business networks. They discussed stopping legislation that would limit weapon sales, and in exchange, Jeff was promised significant financial backing. The donations were routed through American front companies to hide the fact that they were foreign contributions. She clicked to the next slide. We also found similar deals with Chinese tech corporations hoping to avoid U.S. regulatory action. The moment foreign money entered the picture, the entire mood in the room changed. This was no longer a matter of party infighting. It had suddenly escalated into the realm of national security concerns. Even Jeff's most loyal allies were now inching away from him, fully aware that ties to foreign influence campaigns could end political careers. The moderate members, who had depended on Jeff for leadership, realized their association with him could now threaten their own futures. Leader Jeff, Crockett continued, her voice sharper and more forceful. You questioned the outcomes of my work, so let me explain what my efforts have actually achieved. My investigations have uncovered corruption that was draining taxpayer money. They have helped launch criminal cases against people who abuse their positions. They have forced sunlight onto systems that thrive in secrecy. And most importantly, they have shown the American people that someone in Congress is truly fighting for them, not pretending to, while quietly taking corporate cash. She rose from her seat, no longer addressing Jeff alone, but speaking to the entire caucus. Every committee clash you dismissed as drama, every hearing you labeled as showmanship, all of it was exposing the exact kind of corruption you'd been participating in. The only difference is that the individuals I exposed were either from the other party or already out of office. You, meanwhile, are blocking progressive ideas while serving as Democratic leader. You are taking foreign money while claiming to defend American interests. You are not leading this caucus. You are selling it to whoever pays the most. Jeff tried once more to defend himself, though his voice shook under the pressure. These are lies, he insisted. They're distortions designed to smear me because I've been trying to restore discipline. This is the dangerous behavior I warned about. Crockett calmly lifted one last document. Lies? She asked. This is a cooperation agreement with the FBI signed by your former Chief of Staff Marcus Williams 3 weeks ago. He has handed over everything: recordings, documents, internal messages, financials.
The only reason I have all of this is because federal investigators asked me to present it here in this room, to observe your reaction and identify anyone else who might be involved. She slowly scanned the room. Several members stiffened, realizing the weight of her words. And they are especially interested, she continued, in whether other members of leadership have participated in similar activities. A heavy silence fell over the room. The implications hit everyone at the same time. This wasn't simply a heated meeting. This was part of a federal probe unfolding in real time. Several lawmakers instinctively reached for their phones, no doubt thinking of attorneys. Others stared blankly ahead, struggling to process the fact that their own leader might be facing criminal charges. There are FBI agents in the building right now, Crockett said, delivering the final blow. No one is being arrested today, but they are observing how each of you responds to this information, who you call, what steps you take next. All of it is being documented as part of their investigation. So think very carefully about your choices. The immediate fallout inside the caucus was chaotic. Some members stood up, then hesitated, afraid that walking out too quickly might make them appear guilty. Others remained seated, trapped between shock and fear. Unsure of how to behave under possible federal surveillance, Jeff looked like he had aged years in a matter of moments. The strong, confident leadership image he carried for so long was gone, replaced by a hollow expression as he tried to calculate his shrinking escape routes. Within an hour of the meeting ending, news of the confrontation began leaking to reporters. Early stories focused on a leadership meltdown inside the Democratic caucus, though the true scope of the revelations would not hit the public until later. As more information surfaced, the situation quickly grew into one of the largest political scandals in modern U.S. history. A hashtag connected to the controversy began trending within hours, long before the public even understood the full scale of what had happened. That night, Jeff gathered his top advisors and legal team for an emergency strategy session. People in the room later said he cycled between disbelief, frustration, and frantic attempts to figure out how to regain control of the story. His lawyers urged him to step down from leadership immediately, while insisting he was innocent. But Jeff refused, confident he could survive this crisis the way he had survived earlier ones. This turned out to be a major mistake because the situation was about to grow far worse once Crockett's evidence became public. The FBI shifted its investigation into high gear. Early the next morning, federal agents executed coordinated search warrants at Jeff's homes in Washington and New York, as well as at several political organizations tied to him. The raids happened simultaneously to prevent any chance of documents being destroyed. What investigators seized made it clear that the corruption extended far deeper than anyone had suspected. The financial records uncovered in these searches were devastating. Agents found proof of more than $30 million in questionable transfers. Many of these payments were disguised as speaking fees or consultant contracts that actually came from foreign governments. They also uncovered ledgers and emails showing that Jeff had been running a shadow operation alongside his formal responsibilities, using his role to negotiate deals between companies and lawmakers while taking money from all sides. The pharmaceutical evidence was especially damaging. Records showed Jeff had personally intervened to block legislation that would have allowed cheaper generic drugs, even though passing it would have saved Americans billions. Just days after killing the proposal, his leadership PAC received a $5 million donation from brand-name drug manufacturers. Similar patterns appeared with major insurance companies, defense suppliers, and technology giants. In every case, Jeff had loudly supported reform in public while quietly sabotaging it in committee rooms and back-channel meetings. The foreign influence findings were even more serious. According to investigators, Jeff had been in frequent contact with officials connected to multiple foreign governments. In these communications, he reportedly offered to shape U.S. policy in exchange for money funneled through multi-layered corporate routes. The Saudi arrangement Crockett presented was only the beginning. There were also payments connected to Chinese interests, Russian-linked networks, and business groups in the United Arab Emirates. All of this was buried under complex financial structures designed to hide where the money actually came from. Within a week of the caucus showdown, 17 additional Democratic lawmakers found themselves under investigation for their ties to Jeff's political machine. Some had knowingly gone along with the arrangements. Others appeared to have been unknowingly used as part of Jeff's strategy, following leadership instructions without realizing the corrupt motivations behind them. A party that had long promoted itself as a defender of ethics was suddenly facing a self-inflicted catastrophe.
The jury took only 6 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty on every count. When sentencing him to 35 years in federal prison, the judge condemned Jeff's conduct as an extraordinary betrayal of public trust, made even worse by the fact that he had marketed himself as a principled reformer for his entire political career. The sentence was meant to send a clear warning that corruption at the top levels of government would face serious punishment. The fallout for the Democratic Party was deep and long-lasting. The entire leadership structure had to be rebuilt, after many longtime figures were pushed out because of their ties to Jeffrey. Progressive lawmakers who had been ignored or sidelined during Jeffrey's tenure suddenly stepped into key roles. The party also reshaped how it handled fundraising by creating strict transparency rules and enforcing new limits on corporate involvement. For Jasmine Crockett, her clash with Jeff placed her in a powerful new position within the party. Her decision to reveal corruption inside her own ranks earned her respect from people across the political spectrum. While a few accused her of hurting the party during an important election cycle, most understood that exposing the truth mattered more than protecting a fake image of unity built on corporate money and foreign influence. Her careful investigation and clear presentation of evidence became a standard for how oversight should be done, even when it requires confronting your own leadership. As investigators dug deeper after Jeffries' arrest, the corruption was shown to be much wider than anyone first realized. Both major parties were found to have allowed corporate donations and foreign interests to quietly shape the legislative process. This led to major reforms, including strict financial disclosure requirements for all members of Congress, real-time reporting of meetings with lobbyists, and criminal penalties for accepting foreign funds through indirect or hidden channels. The secret networks that Jeff had built forced the country to confront how vulnerable the system had become. Surprisingly, the Democratic Party's political standing improved once the full scope of Jeffries' misconduct became public. Voters supported the party's willingness to address corruption within its own leadership. In comparison, Republicans, who had often defended corrupt members until the evidence was undeniable, appeared less committed to transparency. This allowed Democrats to position themselves as the party focused on accountability and genuine reform. The scandal also caused major international consequences. Several foreign companies and governments were penalized for attempting to influence U.S. policy through Jeff and others connected to him. New international agreements were created to require greater transparency in business dealings involving American political figures. The fact that foreign entities had been able to buy influence so easily sparked a global debate about protecting democracies from external corruption. 5 years after the dramatic confrontation, research showed that the scandal had permanently reshaped American politics. Public trust in government dropped sharply at first, but began to recover as reforms were implemented and corrupt officials were held responsible. Corporate influence in the political process was noticeably reduced due to new rules, though not gone entirely. Most importantly, the belief that party loyalty should outweigh honesty and accountability was shattered. Jeff's attempt to challenge Crockett, only to be exposed by evidence, became a lasting example of what happens when someone attacks others while their own conduct cannot survive basic scrutiny.